Hello and welcome to Who Watches the World Cup with me, Dominic Archer and David Bryan. David, how are you this fine afternoon?
I'm very well, thank you, Dom. How are you?
I'm okay. I was going to say this fine evening because for me it is 10:30 p.m. and then I realised, the world, it's crazy. Did you know that it's not flat? That is something that I learned recently.
Is it?
It's a circular one.
Hang on. Pause the podcast.
You know what? Don't believe what you read on the internet. The world is round. I'm just throwing it out there. Time zones, they're a thing, and they're a real pain in the ass, especially for when it comes for watching the World Cup, because depending upon where the World Cup is happening and where you are, there are games that you miss, and it's infuriating. But today, actually, we both got kind of lucky because normally there are one or two matches that we can watch, but we wanted to talk today about Group E and Group F, and by chance, Sweden, South Korea, both Group F teams, both playing this afternoon. We just watched the game. David, your fresh take. What's your first reaction to this clash of the titans that is Sweden, South Korea?
Were you doing air quotes then? Because you know that no one can see those, right?
It's an audio medium, but I feel like air quotes really they shine through.
They do shine through, yeah. I mean, obviously I sense them, so. Well, yeah, I thought coming straight off of that game, I'll tell you, I was, for no real reason, I was rooting for South Korea. Maybe it's another underdog thing. But that game was very much a, let's try not to lose. Let's try and stay organised. And if you're South Korea, let's try and pass the ball around the Swedish players who are all much stronger and much taller than we are. So let's not try and win a physical battle here because we ain't gonna win that. And yeah, for it to come down to another VAR incident and a penalty kick, I think it's one of those cagey first round group games that we can expect between two teams who are trying to make sure they don't come bottom of a group that is quite challenging and one of the hardest groups, I think, in the draw.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It was interesting seeing South Korea's preparation going into the match. One of the tactics that I read that South Korea was employing in training was switching around their shirts between the different players because Westerners cannot distinguish between Asian faces.
I read about that too. That was shocking.
Yeah. So
incredible.
I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. But I don't know who is being racist in this situation.
Someone's got to be being racist, surely.
But are the Koreans being racist by suggesting that Westerners are so stupid that we can't distinguish Asian faces? Or are the Westerners being racist for not being able... Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of racist or not. It's a matter of exposure to the facial... to the faces of different races. If you live in Sweden, you probably don't encounter that many Koreans. So it's not really a surprise if you have difficulty telling them apart. It's the same with every race around the world. But I thought that was a very strange revelation to come forward until it turned out that the Swedish did send a coach to illegally watch the Korean practice session.
Oh, yeah, maybe we're missing some more air quotes there. Illegally... unadvisedly,
I say
mistakenly. I guess these are all adverbs that may apply in this situation. It's all a bit strange.
Yeah, by illegally I mean like the laws of FIFA, which if we're talking about legality, FIFA may not really be the people to go running to here. But it's interesting what you say about the VAR because it's having a real impact in this World Cup and. An awful lot of the matches here are being decided by penalties at this point. Like, do you think these penalties would be being called anyway, or would they just be 0-0 draws for everyone to sit back and enjoy?
It's so hard to determine what would have occurred had a penalty not been given, and vice versa. And that's always been the case when penalties maybe should have been given in the past in games and then weren't, and when penalties were given that were later by benefit of replay, shown not to have been penalties. But I was very skeptical about VAR in general in the season leading up to this World Cup. I wasn't sure it was really needed. And personally, I always liked that extra inexplicable drama of no matter what happens, sometimes mistakes happen, and that can contribute to that excitement, that drama, that anger sometimes, and the relief sometimes as a football fan or just as a spectator. And I did see it used quite poorly when it was first introduced in various competitions this past season. But I think so far it's been used quite well, and I've been glad to see that it's been used in the minimum amount of instances as they can, and in big moments, like you say, that can really change games and decide games in things like penalties. And if anything, hopefully that will continue. And I like to see justice done in the moment instead of, when perhaps penalties given and we can all see as viewers on television that it shouldn't have been given, and you hope that the other team who feel maybe have been unjustly treated can then go and stick one in the other end and hope karma balances itself. But I think with the introduction of VAR, maybe that won't be necessary. And I will, 6 months ago, if you had told me that I would be saying that I think it's been positive and I hope to see more of it used, I would have denied that as likely.
Well, it's interesting because they've been used for years in American sports. The NFL, for example, is constantly referring to, it's not called VAR, but to that fourth official style video replay.
Yeah. Which is one of the not the contradictions, the controversy around introducing it into our football. I hate having to call it our football, but I also don't like the word soccer, so I'm just going to call it our football. Yeah. Because what the effect it has in the NFL particularly is how slow and drawn out the games become. And, a game that involves an hour of actual play, 4 quarters of 15 minutes, can take 3 or 4 hours just to get through with all the breaks. And that's one thing that football bodies did not want to see happening in our game.
Yeah, I think we have seen a bit of that, because at least I have been watching the matches, and then the extra time comes up, and it has been 5 minutes extra time in games that are 0-0, 1-0, and I'm thinking, why are they giving 5 minutes? Like, that is a lot of extra time to be giving. And I think it's because of this edition of VAR. They're taking extra time just to go and watch.
It could be. It could be. It wouldn't be too hard to
complain at more football, but I'm not going to complain at having more football to watch. But I just thought it was interesting that one thing I just noticed again and again and again is it was always 5 minutes as well. 5 minutes extra time.
Yeah, it seems strange.
It's a lot to be adding on.
Yeah, it would seem strange that it wouldn't be taken off. Like, sure, injury time is there to be added on for stoppages that involve injuries, funnily enough, and substitutions and other stoppages. But why not for VAR? Why not just stop the clock for VAR, particularly? But then perhaps it's not just the VAR that's adding all this injury time, because I agree, I've noticed that too. But one thing I've also noticed is an awful lot of, shall we call it, gamesmanship from players trying to waste time in various methods. But maybe that's a conversation for another day, because I could speak at length on that.
Ooh, well now you're exciting me. You're getting me revved up for. It's going to be the Argentinians. I know it is. The Argentinians and the Portuguese. They're the two. Who are all.
They're not the first to come to my mind based on what I've seen so far. But like I say, when we all get into that another day.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to jump straight across to keep going with analysing the South Korea and Sweden, because, as you're saying, South Korea is kind of the underdog in this situation. But I mean, this match again, there was not much between the teams, and without the penalty, there is nothing between them. That's got to be a surprise, right? Like, Sweden is a solid team. South Korea is one of the better. Easily one of the better Asiatic nations, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm just going off preconceptions here, but I would have thought that the Sweden again would be looking at a pretty comfortable loss. Is this the loss of Ibrahimovic that's holding them back in this?
I don't think so. I mean, he was. I think he hasn't played for the national team since Euro 2016, and he's getting on a bit. He's 36 years old now, and he's had his injury problems over the last couple of years with Man United. But their qualification was good without him. I mean, they were kind of unfortunate. You would have thought to begin with to be drawn in the same qualification group as Holland and France, but ended up beating France, and obviously Holland didn't make it through, and Sweden did see off Luxembourg massively with an 8-0 win, which, Luxembourg are one of those dummy teams that you have to give them their chance, I suppose, to compete, but they're generally not expected to win any of their games. But Sweden, they were strong in their group and kept 7 clean sheets. There's a tongue twister. And then ended up beating Italy in the playoffs, which obviously stopped Italy from coming to a World Cup for the first time. But they've not, even with the presence of Ibrahimovic over the last decade or so, they haven't made it to the last 2 World Cups before this one, and obviously that's around when Ibrahimovic was in his prime, and so I don't think you can pin any of Sweden's strengths just on him when they do have quite a decent squad, I'd say. I mean, I'm not totally excited by their squad, and they've had to include players like Seb Larsson, who is at the tail end of his career. He's 33 years old. He's had a great career in the English Premier League, starting at Arsenal and playing for Birmingham and Sunderland. But at 33 years old, and he started today's game against South Korea, which I think probably wouldn't have happened had they played Germany or Mexico in their first game, and I wouldn't expect him to start either of those 2 games. But South Korea, I think, are pipped to finish bottom in this group as the weaker team of the 3. And as you've touched on, South Korea have been a strong team in Asia in the past, especially if you go back to the World Cup in 2002, which they co-hosted with Japan, and they made it all the way to the semi-finals on this amazing tidal wave of local support and a bit of luck and obviously great quality, and they remained the only Asian team to ever reach the semi-finals. But since then, of course, that was the whole 16 years ago. Their qualification for this tournament, at least, was not glowing. It was fine. I mean, they finished second in the qualification group, but that was behind Iran, who, as we've seen already in this tournament, aren't the most exciting team, but they performed admirably in their first game, and like I say, won their qualification group. But the whole South Korean team only managed 11 goals in that qualification period, which is the same as Christian Eriksen did in his European group for Denmark. So he's not even a striker, So as while they have 1 or 2 stars in their squad, the main 2, of course, being Ki Sung-young, who's been at Swansea for the last 2 years, I think, since they've been relegated. He's likely to leave, but I've always liked Ki Sung-young. I think he's a cultured midfielder with great range of passing and a great touch, and he's their captain for this tournament, so they obviously hold him in high regard. And their star, their key man, is Tottenham's Sung Hyun-min, again, who I'm a big fan of. He was really exciting to watch play in the Premier League this season. I think for Spurs, he was involved either with a goal or an assist in every one goal every other game. He was really key for them back in that sort of that supporting role behind Harry Kane, obviously, who bangs in all those goals, and alongside Dele Alli in that kind of supporting role. So, and we saw in that game today that while they are very well organised, and I think they battle really hard, and they are obviously not obviously, but unlike what we've seen in some other games so far in this group stage, they have showed up. They've come to work their hardest, to try their best, to remain organised, to really give 100%. Because if you're a team like South Korea, especially in this group, you're going to have to. I think there's no way you're going to sail through this. I think like with Germany losing to Mexico in their first game, you'd expect them to bounce back, win the next 2 games, and go through, and everyone will forget about the fact they lost their first game. But I paused because I've forgotten what I was going to say.
But for South Korea, you're not looking to see them come back, reignite the flame against Germany and Mexico.
No, I expect them to have the same level of work rate and spirit No, I just don't. They just don't really have the quality, I think, to trouble either of those other teams. But at least they will come out of. I think they'll fall out of that group with some respect, and people will be glad that they were there, and they wouldn't have wasted their opportunity to at least make their country proud and do everything they can.
Yeah. It really is incredible what is going on in South Korea at the moment as well. Because I'm looking at Sweden, South Korea, thinking, I'm not sure about the domestic and international situation of Sweden and Swedish politics, but I don't think they're under constant nuclear threat. Whereas, South Korea for the last 2 years has been living under some pretty serious duress from the north border, and obviously this is tension that has lasted for the last 50 years. But
yeah, of course,
very recently, for South Korea, it has been a roller coaster ride of a couple of months, where a few months ago the South Korean president says, "Hey, Donald Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for organizing these talks with South Korea. With North Korea. We're going to give Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing the two Koreas to the table." And then there's been a huge show of reconciliation between the North Korean government and the South Korean government. They're actually meeting each other. They're visiting each other's countries. They're showing that maybe there is a diplomatic way out of it.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see that.
It's really incredible. But then after Donald Trump meets Kim Jong-un in Singapore, Donald Trump turns around and he says, "We are no longer conducting military exercises with South Korea." Which that has been going on for decades and decades, where the US and South Korea hold joint military exercises along the DMZ to show the North Koreans, "Hey, we're still here," right? And the US has 30,000 troops in South Korea.
Do they? Wow.
The US is heavily invested in the Korean Peninsula, and after Singapore, Donald Trump has turned around and said, "We're no longer conducting the same style of war games." And what's really remarkable is he turned around and slammed the South Korean president for their trading practices with the US. So he's turned around and said that basically the South Koreans have been giving them a raw deal for the last 20 years. And the trade deal he's talking about specifically, Donald Trump says, was signed in 2011. But this is really unprecedented for an American president to go against South Korea in this situation. It must be so destabilizing, because that has always been what balances the Korean Peninsula, in that the North Koreans have the support of China in almost anything. China is North Korea's major ally, and obviously they're just across the border, they're really close. But without the Americans, what have the South Koreans got? The Japanese? Again, these are historic rivals. And if I'm a South Korean person, right now is a time of unease and stress. And
yeah,
that's something you bring with you when you're traveling around the world, when you're traveling to Russia, who are also big players in this situation. And that is not something that Sweden is bringing to the table. What is What is Sweden thinking about when they go in there?
I don't know. Don't they have the highest suicide rate in the world? Maybe that weighs heavily.
Well, I guess
on
that probably plays into it, I suppose. But they're also one of those countries that's like the happiest nation in the world. I'm not sure how you balance the happiest nation and the highest suicide rate.
Well, don't quote me on that. I haven't researched that exactly, but I remember there's one country in particular in Scandinavia has quite a high rate of suicide.
Well, there's so many Scandinavian generalizations. They've got good socialized education, a general balance of equality, economic equality within the country.
They like salty fish. I mean, these are all true.
those meatballs. Mwah.
Oh, and the meatballs. Let's not forget the meatballs and
Just
flat pack
like,
furniture and such things.
that's what they are bringing to Russia,
Russia.
while the South Koreans are bringing a threat of annihilation. And I think that's something that weighs your team down going into the World Cup, is thinking like, oh God, when this is over, is there even going to be a home to go back to?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we talked before about how what can be happening back home can affect a football team going across the world for a tournament. I think we spoke about that when we spoke about Egypt and what's happening there in Iran. And it's interesting that looking at the South Korean squad, they are primarily based either in South Korea themselves or in Japan, not too far away. And only, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 of the squad are based in Europe. So while that's the majority of the squad who are day to day living with the realities of what is happening on home soil, and I'm sure when the squad all comes together in preparation for tournaments or for friendlies, the players who are perhaps based outside of Korea and maybe even including the players based in Japan are going to be getting first-hand accounts of what is really going on as far as the South Korean people are concerned.
It's got to be just unbelievably stressful, that situation, because again, months ago this was being heralded as perhaps an end to the conflict, because this is the Korean War never finished. There was never a peace treaty that was signed that ended the Korean War. It's just that they built the world's largest minefield between their two countries, and no one's crossing that. So technically, these two countries are still at war, and North Korea has the artillery to reach Seoul if it really wants to.
No doubt.
And the only reason they don't is because the Americans would retaliate. But if Donald Trump was to, further remove America as a deterrent from that situation, that's something that's got to play on the minds of those people. But that's a pretty big downer for talking of the football situation. So what I would like to do as a form of segue was to go back to your favorite Egyptian, Mo Salah.
All of our favorite Egyptians, surely.
Yes, yeah. Okay, sorry. Because
besides maybe what's his name, Rami Malek from Mr. Robot.
Oh,
second favorite.
He is a handsome man.
He's good. He's I think he's a good actor, but he's playing Freddie Mercury in the upcoming Queen biopic.
That is good casting.
That's great casting, isn't it?
And that reminds me of my critique of the Swedish national team. They are not an attractive football team.
Not enough handsome men for your liking.
Man, you know what? Earlier I was commenting on just how goddamn handsome the Denmark squad was, and I realise now it's not the blonde hair that does it, because the Swedes all have blonde hair and they were butt ugly. So it's just something about that.
Apologies to any Swedish listeners that maybe
no apologies.
No
I'm not saying that Swedes in general are ugly. Obviously, Swedes in general are beautiful, but every country in the world, everyone in the world is beautiful in general. It's just the Swedish national team is not. But moving swiftly on, or actually, I suppose, continuing in that vein, bringing back up Mo Salah, you were telling me that the piece of news where Mo Salah was essentially ambushed by the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov the other day, right? Where Mo Salah, he's staying in his hotel. He gets a call from the manager. It's like, oh, there's somebody who wants to meet you, and he goes down there and. It's the strongman dictator of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, and his agent was very quick to point out that Mo didn't know that this meeting was happening. He didn't know who was down there. Because there was.
You can imagine the Chechnyan propaganda that's been circulating since, all the pictures of Mo Salah next to the Chechnyan leader. What a poster that must be.
It's pretty remarkable, because this actually. You watch how I'm going to do this, Dave. This ties in to our discussions for Germany and the German national team, because
How so? Do tell.
I will. Because one of the reasons that Mo Salah's agent was very desperate to distance him from Kadyrov is that this guy is infamous, which is why when we spoke about him before, I knew a little bit, because Chechnya rose to the headlines last year, around this time last year, for an outburst of anti-gay, anti-LGBT violence that was going on, that was reported within Chechnya. And Chechnya is predominantly Muslim. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with why the Egyptian team was. I know that a lot of the different teams are fasting around the time of the World Cup, which is one of the reasons the Iranian team was said not to be doing so well. So that might make sense for why they would want to stay in Chechnya. But there's a large, last year that you had journalists and humanitarian groups reporting just a wave of anti-gay violence going on throughout the country. And the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin is a big supporter of Ramzan Kadyrov. Kadyrov is Putin's guy in Chechnya. And Putin was quick to downplay what was going on and didn't seem to do anything to prevent the persecution, which is where steps in the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Where,
oh, yes.
In she comes. Angela Merkel comes in and she says, Putin, please maybe look into whether this is true or not, and then maybe write him a strongly worded letter. And this is a really interesting point of contention with Germany at the moment, where with the UK going through the Brexit, going through the Brexit situation at the moment, of which I am not stressed about. Germany, which has always been kind of the center point of the EU anyway, is having to step up. And with Donald Trump destroying the reputation of America on the international stage, Germany is pushing itself further forward as a kind of moral arbiter as well as an economic one. When you had the burst of Syrian refugees, Germany took a lot of them in, and still now Angela Merkel is fighting her own interior minister to continue allowing refugees into the country. The Germans are trying very hard to be seen as the country of morality. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I don't think it wins Angela Merkel votes on a democratic position. I don't know if it's some kind of historic responsibility. Germany is very aware of Berlin, especially, is covered in its history of what happens when you leave people to suffer when you don't do something. That could very much play into it. But what I thought was really interesting researching into Germany was that Germany, again, was one of the countries that removed Russia from the G8. It's now the G7. The G8 were the 8 most prosperous nations on the planet. Yeah. Now it's the G7 because they removed Russia after they annexed Ukraine. And the Germans were one of the nations that stood up and said, this cannot be allowed to continue. They made a big point of backing Ukraine, which is not an EU nation yet, but is on the way to becoming one, and saying that this, if Putin continues along this path, then we're in real trouble. And so the Germans have made a big show of being, the keepers, the gatekeepers of what is right in Europe. Which is why it's really interesting. This is my catchphrase now, interesting, that they are also two-faced liars.
Whoa.
No, this is...
You enjoyed that,
that may sound... I did enjoy that, because you know how I feel, especially, like, I will stick a Freedom for Palestine poster on my wall, and argue for that for days, because I really want to back the German government on this. right? Like standing up for Ukraine in the face of a Russian invasion and holding the Russians to account. That is so important. And the UK has stepped away from its responsibilities in that regard. America has stepped away from its responsibilities in that regard. And the Germans seemed to be the ones who were actually going to do something about it. But instead, we have this pipeline called the Nord Stream 2, which is a gas pipeline running from Russia to Germany that circumvents Ukraine. So this is maybe a little bit boring for a football podcast, but essentially...
No, never.
Russia is a large producer of natural gas, and that is the fuel by which most of Europe runs on. At the moment, a lot of that fuel goes through Ukraine, and 2% of the Ukrainian economy, 2% of Ukraine's economy comes from the tax it makes by that gas going through the country. Ukraine doesn't make any of the gas itself, but its land is in the way, so it gets to charge tax for the gas coming through, right?
Sure.
But what Russia decided to do in one of its many efforts to fuck Ukraine was to build a pipeline under the Baltic Sea that runs directly from Russia to Germany, completely bypassing Ukraine. And it makes economic sense if you are the Russians, because you don't want to be paying potentially billions of pounds to the Ukrainians if you don't have to. But for the Germans, what they have done is they have said, we support Ukraine in this situation, and then they have turned around and gone, unless it's economically beneficial not to. And that is a really strange situation. Now, to Angela Merkel's credit, she apparently did go to Putin and say, hey, if we build this pipeline, you've got to guarantee that you'll continue going through Ukraine as well. Like, Ukraine needs some love. Give Ukraine some love. To which Putin said, only if it benefits us, basically. As if you could convince Putin to be a nice guy.
Sure. He's got it in him.
Yeah, but this is a victory for Russia. And, this is the one time in my life I'm going to support Boris Johnson. Because Boris Johnson, the British foreign minister and all-round wanker, came forward to say the UK's position on this is that Germany needs to stop. Because if Germany goes ahead, it's a big boon for Russia. And the Russians agree. Pravda, which is the famous Russian newspaper, the most powerful newspaper in Russia, claimed that the UK is going to collapse. The Russians believe that our anti-Russian stance will be destroyed because we need their gas. We need that fuel, and we are going to collapse and side with the Germans on this. It's just a matter of time. And that really grates me, Dave. That really grates me. And so this is why I'm so annoyed with Angela Merkel on this one. I don't know how it plays into the German team not doing very well against Mexico, but it really gets on my nerves.
I can't imagine in the dressing room after Germany lost to Mexico, Joachim Löw, the German coach, being like, "Now I know you're all upset about the pipeline, but we really need to get this out of our heads before our next two games, if at all possible, please. Dankeschön."
Well, you say that, but I don't know. This is an attack on European sovereignty, and anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Are you
okay? So
are you calmed down?
The Germans are not just disappointing me politically; they're also disappointing me on the football pitch. Like, this is one of the greatest teams of the last 10 years, the last 20 years.
The last 50, 60 years, yeah.
Yeah, is it just that they don't have...
days as well?
Is it just that they don't have Philip Lahm? Is that where this is going wrong?
Hey, that's a glaring weakness as far as I'm concerned. I loved a bit of Lahm. He was quality.
Yeah, me too.
But I think where there is a bit of some veterans have dropped out of the Germany squad in the last couple of years. In that typical German fashion, they've got some pretty worthwhile and worthy replacements for them. The man who replaced Lahm essentially in the Bayern Munich team, Joshua Kimmich, has stepped into his boots at right full-back for the national team, and like I say, he's a very worthy replacement. I think, at least going forward, he's one of the more the modern ilk of full-back/wing-backs who is very dangerous going forward, is good with the ball, he can cross from anywhere, maybe lacks a little bit of concentration at the back, which was a glaring weakness that we saw when they played against Mexico, where they were allowing Mexico opportunities more than Mexico were playing brilliantly to create them.
It was interesting watching... Oh, for fuck's sake. No, I'm sorry. I'm catching myself on the word interesting. And it's really annoying me.
I don't think so. I think people will be wearing T-shirts with your face on that say, "That's interesting." In no time at all.
Yeah, I can only hope so.
I've said Ghana a lot. I said in the first couple of podcasts tons, so I'm going to try and cut that out. Just as Steve's probably going to cut this out of the podcast.
I mean, he might not even listen this far, so this might end up going in. But anyway, it was strange to see the Mexican team doing so well, considering kind of how inefficient they were. Again, the German team was dominating in the passing game, in the possession game. The Mexicans were just losing the ball constantly, and yet it didn't seem to make any difference. The Germans never seemed to actually capitalize on the opportunities that they had, which is really strange, because this is Germany, of all teams, not to capitalize on, being given these chances.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think anyone would have expected Germany to slip. I mean, in the past, we've seen big teams slip up at in the opening games and the group stages. France, after winning their own tournament in '98, went to Japan and Korea in 2002 as strong favourites to at least reach the final, and then they ended up losing their first game to Senegal, who at that point no one had heard of. As a result of that, we saw a great influx of Senegalese talent getting into big European teams, like El Hadji Diouf and Papa Bouba Diop, who is not only one of my favourite players of that generation, but also one of my favourite players whose names I like to say. Papa Bouba Diop. It's brilliant.
That is a great name.
Yeah, but we've seen, and Brazil at the last World Cup, their group stage wasn't entirely convincing when they were hosting it. But I would never have thought Germany are the quintessential tournament team. There doesn't seem to matter who is in the squad and who's been in charge, but as long as football has been organised and performed at this level in this format, Germany, or in West Germany previous to that, have known how to get it done. And with Joachim Löw, the current coach, he's overseen the last 5 trips that the German team have taken to major tournaments, and he's taken them to the semi-final on every occasion at least. Of course, they went all the way to the final and won the last World Cup. So this is not... And I've said that some veterans have left the squad, such as Philip Lahm. But there's not many. And the squad that we saw go out onto the pitch against Germany... sorry, they are Germany. Against Mexico, had everything that you would think they would need to walk through Mexico. From all the way from the back, with 4 of their back 5 are the Bayern Munich back 5, with Manuel Neuer in goal, and then Kimmich, as we mentioned before, and that central defensive partnership of Hummels and Boateng. Bayern Munich are one of the strongest teams in Europe, and again, just the same as the national team, have been for as long as there's been European club football. Bayern Munich have been up there with the best. So, and looking back at their warm-up and their preparation for this tournament, there was no real suggestion that maybe they weren't ready. I mean, I've said they are the quintessential tournament team, and their 4 warm-up games weren't strolls in the park either, to be fair. I mean, they did beat Saudi Arabia 2-1, but then they drew 1-1 with Spain and lost to Brazil and Austria. You might say that they were perhaps experimenting a little bit with the lineup and with the systems, but I would suggest by now Germany know their system. It's the German system. It's the German way to play that, as we've talked about before, they've been playing since they were schoolboys. It is the German way of football. They've been doing it all their professional lives. But I suppose on the flip side to that, if everyone knows what the German style of football is, what the German system is, then there has to be a way to stop it. And as well as I think Mexico shaped up to do just that, they were very organised. They had solid banks of midfield and defence to just close up any gaps, to not allow Germany's creative players to try and create anything. Mesut Ozil and Toni Kroos in midfield didn't really carve any holes and make any great inroads towards the Mexican goal. But having said that, I think Mexico could play the best game of their lives and still get beaten by Germany if Germany are playing the way Germany should. I think that's maybe the key point from that match. Germany didn't really play as Germany should. And one area in particular I thought they were lacking was in that centre-forward position. So Timo Werner has had a really good couple of seasons at club level. So he's kind of taking on the mantle of the German centre-forward from Miroslav Klose, who is the record World Cup goal scorer. If you want to have a look and see how many goals he scored in World Cups throughout his career, that is the number that is greater than any other player. greater than Ronaldo, greater than even Bertie Vogts, another great player of the past, Pele, who played in a number of World Cups, Maradona. He has scored the most goals in World Cups, and he came to the end of his career, I think even at the last World Cup, where he broke that record. He was still in his early to mid-30s and may have not even been included if not for his pedigree. But while Timo Werner has scored 21 goals for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga this season, he perhaps is the area where, as well as you can be playing for your club, you ain't no Miroslav Klose. And the players behind that centre forward position, who are the creative types, who've mentioned Ozil, Kroos, and some of their more attacking wide players, they're used to playing and feeding the likes of Miroslav Klose, not Timo Werner. And I think that's something they're going to have to work on. And I'm sure they will. To get the best out of your striker, he needs to be a focal point, and they couldn't figure out how to do that.
Well, let's take a quick sidestep over to Group E, because we haven't spoken about them at all, really. I don't want to go too much into Brazil, because I'm hoping to do just a whole episode on Brazil and where they are as a team and what happened post the 2014 World Cup to lead them up to where they are now.
Sure, yeah.
As a football squad and politically. But again, the same as Germany. You know, this is Brazil of all the teams. I don't even need to draw a connection between how good Brazil is at football. You know, again, the same with Germany. You don't even have to say it. You just know.
Yeah,
it's ingrained in the culture.
In the culture, in the game, it's the song. It's just like watching Brazil. Historically, they are the great footballing nation, which every young footballer wants to play like Brazil play.
Yeah,
you're right. It's just they are the football nation.
So who wants to play like Switzerland? That's the real question. Because at the moment, I a couple of days ago, I would have thought, well, not many people really want to play like Switzerland. But, maybe that's not such a terrible idea right now.
Well, if you play like Switzerland against Brazil, then as we've seen, you can get points on the board.
Is it just the same case, do you think, as with Germany, where this is a squad that hasn't quite figured out what it is that they're doing, or they're not really too sure of themselves at the moment? Do you think they're gonna come into their own later on in the tournament, or is it just a case of waiting for things to click?
Yeah, I think Brazil, having not lost their opening game, I think it's just a case of them getting up to speed. They at least showed some creativity and created chances, and showed that with a player like Philippe Coutinho, who can score goals like that, that they're always going to be a threat, and they weren't hopeless, as we've seen with other big nations so far in this tournament. So no, I think it's just a matter of time with Brazil, and in the following 2 games, I think they should be much more comfortable.
Yeah. And for those last two games they've got, we had the mighty Serbia going up against the Titans that are Costa Rica.
There's some derision in your voice there. I do not. This is a sour taste, Dominic. Sour taste.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, we spent 46 minutes talking about Germany and Brazil, and the two nations you've got left are Costa Rica and Serbia, and it just feels like that. This is my problem with the World Cup so far. I know this is something that you're really enjoying, but that I'm finding kind of frustrating. Is that yes, I want to support the underdog, but I'd like the underdog to win about 5-4. I want to see the great nations turn up and play like the great nations. I want the underdog to also beat them, but I want like 9 goals in a game. Whereas
drama, excitement, circus football.
But Costa Rica, Serbia, it's 1-0 to Serbia in the 56th minute. Like, can we expect anything better from these two teams, or are they just fodder for Brazil to go through?
I think that's a fair point to say, is that Serbia, Switzerland, as we've seen, and Costa Rica would have come into this tournament going, how can we stop Brazil from scoring too many goals? So Switzerland set themselves out to play defensively and be organised and be strong and just to outnumber Brazil wherever they could. Serbia will do well to copy that system, because I think Serbia and Switzerland are fairly similar in terms of their stature and their style. And then you have to expect, without that physical strength and European style of organised football, Costa Rica are probably going to be the whipping boys, and I can't see them finishing anywhere besides fourth in the group without really having the talent to score goals willy-nilly like Brazil do. And without having the strength in defence. I mean, their goalkeeper is, of course, Keylor Navas, the Real Madrid goalkeeper, but you can't win a tournament with a good goalie. Maybe a goalie is the sort of person who can maybe save you some points here and there. Maybe he keeps you in a game that you're drawing in, or he keeps the goal difference low if he's facing a lot of goals. But yeah, I think you're right. It's just a case of how many goals will Brazil score against their remaining 2 opponents.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, because I think I think you're right with what you're saying here, where the games that we've seen have actually been pretty fantastic displays of defensive talent. And while that is interesting to watch, I'd rather watch magnificent displays of attacking talent.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you'd expect from Brazil. I think with the Costa Rica Serbia game, neither of those teams are setting out really to lean too much on defending. Like, Costa Rica aren't so afraid of Serbia that they will not try and score, and Serbia would have thought of themselves as the favourites for that match. So it was just a matter of not leaving any gaps in the back to be exploited on the counter, and then just try and score a goal. And in the end, it takes a free kick from their left back to win that game.
Well, at the moment, Dave, we are actually missing Belgium versus Panama right now.
We are. I actually turned my TV off because it was distracting me as we were trying to, at the time of recording. So I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, well, we should wrap this up quickly, but give me a quick prediction right now for when we turn the TV back on. What do you reckon the score is going to be? Belgium versus Panama. We're 22 minutes into the match. What do you think the score's going to be?
As we've seen, Belgium really kind of struggle to gel with all their superstars, and Panama have been very organised in the surprise package really in qualifying. I don't think there's going to have been any goals yet. I think Belgium will not really come into their own until the second half.
Yeah, I am going to go with the trend for the rest of the World Cup, which has been nothing happens in the first half. So I am except for the Portugal-Spain game, which I slept through. So
I'm sure you'll see good games yet. I don't think you're going to sleep through all the good games there.
I hope so.
There's hope for you.
I'm very happy tonight to sleep through England Tunisia. If I miss that is absolutely fine with me. I'll happily watch the highlights in the morning.
Dare we talk about what we expect from that one in a quick before we delve into it properly in the next episode, since
Okay.
they're playing today and we won't get to record until after the game,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
I don't think I know a single player who is playing for the England squad.
Oh, really? You're that out of touch?
I don't think I could. I know Raheem Sterling is there because I keep seeing on the news that he likes guns or something. And that's all I know. That's all I know. I know Joe Hart isn't in goal, but I don't know who's taken over for him. I'm guessing Harry Kane is there probably.
He is present, yes.
Is he the captain?
He is the captain.
That
Absolutely
is
fantastic.
ridiculous.
Well, maybe we need to delve into a leadership question when we get onto the Group G discussion concerning England.
You know, I'd be ready to start right now if I didn't want to go and watch the Belgium game. So
Let's do that then.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode, and I hope you don't have to listen to me tear into the England squad in the next episode, which will be about Groups G and Group H. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches That. I fucked that one up.
Take two.
You know, I don't even trust Steve to edit that out.